Imagine waking up rich and going to bed broke. No war, no warning, just silence, fear, and the dust of broken dreams. That was America in 1929 when $200 billion evaporated overnight, taking hope and comfort with it. It wasn't a bomb or an invasion. It was something far quieter, a financial collapse that changed the world forever. So how did the richest nation on earth fall apart without a single shot fired? Let's rewind to the party before the fall. It's 1922 and America's dancing. Factories hum, cities glow, and everyone believes prosperity will never end. The war is over, jazz is booming, and the only thing higher than the music is the optimism of the crowd. Tanks become toasters, rifles become refrigerators, and the average home feels like a glimpse of the future. New York's skyline stretches upward like ambition itself, steel and glass racing to touch the clouds. Radios buzz in 10 million homes, broadcasting laughter, news, and the promise of a modern life. Mike, our narrator, looks around and says, the 20s didn't just roar, they howled. America falls in love with gadgets, cars, and the idea that comfort is a right, not a luxury. Farmers, once rich from wartime demand, struggle as prices crash, so they borrow to survive the new decade. Shiny tractors replace horses, but not debt. The machines just make farmers go broke faster. Meanwhile, in the cities, people discover their favorite new hobby, buying things they can't afford. Buy now, pay later becomes the new religion of progress, and everyone's praying to credit instead of God. Banks are thrilled. They hand out installment loans to anyone with a pulse, and maybe even a dog. Mike smirks. It's like saying, sure, I'll marry you. We've been on 2 dates. America's economy spins faster, powered by dreams, debts, and a belief that the music will never stop. From Detroit to Dallas, factories pump out cars like candy, and the country smells like gasoline and optimism. But behind the glitter, cracks are forming. Debt piles up, and nobody's checking if the floor can hold. By 1928, Wall Street becomes Disneyland for adults, a playground where everyone's a genius. Margin loans let anyone buy $100 of stock with just $10 down. It's the roaring economy's favorite magic trick. The remaining $90, borrowed. But who cares? Stocks only go up, right? Mike leans in. When your barber and your dog start giving stock tips, maybe it's time to worry. Between 1924 and 1929, the Dow Jones quadruples. People feel unstoppable, untouchable, immortal. Fundamentals, who needs them? Profits are boring, vibes are everything. Companies start creating holding companies that own other holding companies that own absolutely nothing. It's layers of paper castles built on hot air and champagne. A few economists like Roger Babson try to sound the alarm. A crash is coming. Wall Street laughs and tells him to go outside and touch grass. The jazz band keeps playing louder. Dollars rain from the sky, and no one cares where they come from, as long as the party keeps going. But every party has an end, and this one was about to collapse in spectacular fashion. It's October 1929, and America wakes up to its worst hangover yet. On Black Tuesday, the stock market doesn't just fall, it dives headfirst into concrete. The ticker tape spews red numbers like blood from a wound. Phones ring, traders scream, chaos reigns. One man faints, wakes up, checks his portfolio, and faints again. $14 billion vanish in a single day, equivalent to $200 billion today. Sell everything, one man shouts, except my Patagonia vest. It's all I have left. Outside the stock exchange, crowds gather in stunned silence, staring at the ruins of their dreams. Some cry, some laugh, others simply stand still, trying to understand how it all disappeared. The Roaring Twenties didn't end. They face-planted into a brick wall while carrying everyone's retirement plan. Margin calls begin. Investors who bought on debt must now pay money they never had. Rich on Monday, bankrupt by Thursday. The American dream just defaulted. Bankers who once toasted martinis now stare at balance sheets like ancient hieroglyphs. Then come the banks themselves. Grand marble pillars, hiding nothing but paper promises. As the market implodes, loans go unpaid, and one by one, the banks follow their customers into ruin. Crowds storm the branches, pounding on doors, screaming for their savings. Your money is safe, tellers shout through locked doors. Okay, maybe not completely safe. Families lose everything. Grandpa's bonds are worthless. Aunt Margaret's savings are gone. Mike sighs. Little Timmy's piggy bank is still full, so technically, he's now the richest in the house. The panic spreads faster than any rumor. People run, not walk, to banks that no longer have anything left. The great American trust collapses overnight. The marble walls echo with the sound of desperation and disbelief. The bank manager whispers, "Please stay calm," as if calm could buy back their lost savings. In towns across America, long lines form outside every branch, faces tight with fear and disbelief. The air smells of sweat, ink, and hopelessness. Money, once sacred, now feels imaginary. Entire families watch their life savings vanish, leaving only paper receipts and a haunting silence. "Everything's gone?" a mother asks. The teller nods. "Everything," Mike murmurs. And just like that, a nation built on credit learned what it means to be broke. Across the ocean, the shockwaves hit Europe. American banks demand repayment on overseas loans. Germany's fragile economy cracks. Britain staggers, and global trade falls by half in just 3 years. The world economy, once a roaring engine, chokes on its own dust. Newspapers try to stay positive. Markets adjust as investors take profits, beside photos of men selling wedding rings. Politicians insist the worst is over, even as breadlines stretch around city blocks. President Hoover speaks calmly into the radio, assuring citizens the economy is fundamentally sound. Mike adds, "Meanwhile, millions sit at empty tables, wondering which part of that sentence helps them eat." The crash wasn't the bottom, it was the beginning of a 10-year free fall into hunger and dust. By 1931, factories grind to a halt, the music stops, the lights dim, and America exhales in exhaustion. Unemployment hits 25%. 1 in 4 workers stands idle, staring at locked factory gates. Detroit, once an industrial crown jewel, watches its auto plants close one by one. Production collapses by 75%, and the hum of machinery fades into memory. Men line up in silence outside factories, hats in hand, waiting for jobs that no longer exist. Breadlines snake through downtowns, quiet, endless, heavy with shame. Mothers rise at dawn to stand in soup lines, their children clutching tin bowls and fading hope. Teachers report students fainting in class, not from boredom, but from hunger. America isn't starving metaphorically, it's starving literally. The nation's dignity thins alongside its wallets. The suicide rate soars as despair takes hold. Newspapers stop printing obituaries. They can't keep up. Behind every statistic lies a name, a family, a dream turned to dust. Marriage rates collapse. Birth rates fall. The future becomes something too painful to imagine. Mike says softly, "How can you dream of weddings when you can't even promise dinner?" And then the sky itself turns against them. Years of overfarming strip the land bare. When the rains stop, the soil cracks, and the wind begins to howl like an angry god. Dust storms rise from the plains, towering, biblical, swallowing towns whole. They call them black blizzards, walls of dirt that blot out the sun and bury crops alive. Families cough through nights, waking coated in the soil that once fed them. Livestock suffocate, homes fill with dust. The heartland itself begins to die. Millions pack everything into broken-down cars and drive west, chasing rumors of jobs and rain. "California or bust," their signs read, but for many it's just bust. In Washington, President Hoover pleads for patience, calling large-scale aid un-American. He launches the Hoover Dam, an engineering marvel, but it can't feed the hungry in Chicago. His name becomes a symbol of despair. Hoovervilles, Hoover blankets, Hoover flags, empty pockets turned inside out. Mike sighs. Even progress had his name, but so did the pain. Summer 1932. Tens of thousands of World War I veterans march on Washington, demanding promised bonuses. They set up camp peacefully outside the Capitol, hoping their country remembers them. Congress says no. Hoover says no. Then the army comes. Tear gas fills the air. Tents burn. Families flee. The government turns its weapons on its own heroes. Americans watch in disbelief, not just at what's happening, but at who they become. Radicalism spreads. Socialist rallies rise. Communists recruit, not from belief, but from hunger. Crime surges. Outlaws like Bonnie and Clyde become folk heroes, symbols of rebellion against a broken system. America wasn't just broke, Mike says, it was broken. And yet through the smoke and sorrow, something still held. Not hope, not belief, but endurance. People didn't quit. They migrated, they lined up, they held their families, and they survived. Mike whispers, not because they believed things would get better, but because there was no other choice. By 1933, America is exhausted, beaten, and desperate for someone to lead it out of the wreckage. On March 4th, Franklin Delano Roosevelt stands before the nation to take the oath of office. Millions lean toward their radios, waiting for something, anything that sounds like hope. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself, Roosevelt declares. The words strike like lightning. For the first time in years, America exhales. The crowd doesn't cheer, it breathes. Roosevelt doesn't wait. Within days, he launches a wave of programs to put people back to work. Young men in threadbare clothes are handed shovels, tents, and purpose. You're here to plant trees and save the country, one foreman tells them. In that order. The Civilian Conservation Corps gives the jobless work, food, and a reason to get up in the morning. Roads, parks, forests. America begins to rebuild itself, one shovel at a time. Next comes the Works Progress Administration. Millions hired to build bridges, schools, and post offices. Mike narrates, they weren't just building structures, they were rebuilding pride. Men who once stood in bread lines now stand on scaffolding, lifting steel instead of begging for soup. The Tennessee Valley Authority electrifies the South, turning darkness into light, despair into progress. Entire towns glow for the first time. Radios crackle to life, and families gather around their new miracle. Light. In one small house, a farmer turns on a bulb and whispers, "We made it." Slowly, unmistakably, life stirs. GDP rises, unemployment falls. The dust begins to settle. But FDR doesn't just want to restart the engine. He wants to rebuild the machine. So he creates rules. The SEC to keep Wall Street from gambling again. The FDIC to protect savings. Banks reopen, and this time people walk in not to withdraw, but to trust again. Social Security is born, not to make anyone rich, but to make sure no one is forgotten. Mike says, it told the people, you matter. We'll remember you. You won't have to work until you collapse. Even artists find purpose again. The Federal Arts Project hires painters, photographers, and writers. Their task, capture the soul of a nation learning how to stand again. One photo, Dorothea Lange's migrant mother, becomes the face of survival itself. Her eyes don't say, we're saved. They say, we're surviving. Hollywood joins the chorus. Theaters fill as the Wizard of Oz paints hope in Technicolor. Mike smiles. Even in depression, America still dreamed, maybe more than ever. Cities buzz again, restaurants reopen, swing music returns to the air. If you squint, the skyline almost looks alive again. Cranes rising where despair once stood. In the distance, factories hum once more. But the rhythm is different this time. The machines no longer make radios and cars alone. They forge helmets, boots, and ammunition. The world outside is changing again. Another storm is brewing, darker and louder than before. Mike says quietly, the Great Depression didn't end with a celebration. It ended with work, blistered hands, tired backs, and laws written in sweat. It ended with hope, not applause. It ended with a nation that chose piece by piece to rise again. A man signs his first paycheck in years. A woman turns on a light and smiles through tears. A child eats dinner and asks, will tomorrow be like this too? Maybe, his mother says. Maybe it will. The radio hums with FDR's voice calm and steady, wrapping a broken nation in words of reassurance. Together, he says, we will build a better tomorrow. And for once, people believe him. The streets fill with chatter, laughter, and the sound of typewriters clicking again. Hope is fragile, but it's real, and it's enough. America, bruised and wiser, learns that prosperity isn't a promise, it's a responsibility. The decade ends not with fireworks, but with determination. As dawn rises over the factories, smoke curls skyward like prayers. The workers return, sleeves rolled, ready to rebuild what was lost. Mike narrates, they didn't know it yet, but the next storm was already forming across the ocean. Europe trembles, armies march. The radio whispers words like invasion and war. America stands at the edge of another chapter, older, cautious, but no longer naive. The lessons of the Great Depression linger. Wealth can vanish, but resilience endures. Maybe that's the real story, Mike says. Not how America fell, but how it kept getting up. He looks at the camera, half smiling, because sometimes surviving is the victory. The jazz fades in again, soft, slow, almost sacred. And that, Mike concludes, is how a nation broke, bent, and built itself back together.